The night everything changed, started like any other. The sky was dark, the air heavy with the scent of alcohol and regret. My father, a man who had always been protective of me, had made a choice, one that would shape the rest of my life. "You've loved Ethan for 10 years, Erica," he said, his voice steady yet filled with something unreadable. "And I know he feels something for you too. He just refuses to admit it." I frowned, gripping the glass in my hand. "Dad, what are you talking about?" He sighed, pouring another drink for himself. "You've waited long enough. If he won't take the step, we will." I wanted to ask what he meant, but then I felt it, a strange warmth spreading through my body. My hands trembled as I looked at him, realization dawning in my eyes. "Dad, what did you do?" He gave me a tired smile. "You'll thank me later." At that moment, the door to my room opened. Ethan stumbled in, clearly intoxicated, his sharp features softened by the haze of alcohol. He didn't seem to see me clearly. "Ethan?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He swayed slightly, looking around as if lost. Then he muttered my name, almost like a sigh, "Erica." The door shut behind him, and my world collapsed. I woke up the next morning, with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. The events of the night before replayed in my mind like a bad dream. Ethan lay beside me, his expression unreadable as he stared at the ceiling. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, detached. "I'll take responsibility. We'll get married." I turned to look at him, my heart clenching at his distant gaze. "Ethan," but he was already out of bed, pulling on his clothes. "Don't misunderstand, Erica. I don't love you. This is just the right thing to do." The words stung, cutting through me like a blade. I had dreamed of this moment for years, Ethan, the man I had secretly loved for so long, agreeing to be with me. But not like this. Never like this. Still, I told myself it was enough. That love could grow. That one day, he would look at me and see more than just a mistake. I was wrong. The wedding was a quiet affair. No grand celebrations, no heartfelt vows, just a simple exchange of rings and a lifeless kiss on the forehead. Ethan barely spoke to me, treating the whole event like an obligation rather than a union. Not long after, he began traveling for work, each trip lasting longer than the last. Then, one day, he left for what would be his longest absence yet, 3 years. I found out I was pregnant shortly after he left. I held on to the news like a fragile secret, hoping that when he returned, he would see Ava, our daughter, and everything would change. He would see a piece of himself in her and finally come home. So I waited. Every day, I watched the door, expecting it to swing open. Every time my phone rang, I hoped it would be his voice on the other end. But all I received were brief, impersonal messages. "Busy. Can't talk now. Take care." And then, silence. 3 years later, the news came, Ethan was returning. I dropped everything to meet him at the airport. Ava, now 3 years old, dressed in her prettiest dress, her tiny hands clutching the drawing she had made for her father. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as we stood among the crowd, waiting for him to appear. And then, he did. But he wasn't alone. Ethan walked through the airport hand in hand with a woman, Julie. In his arms, he carried a little girl, Emma. He looked at them the way I had always dreamed he would look at me and Ava. My heart stopped. "Dad." Ava called out, running toward him, her arms outstretched. Ethan glanced at her, just a glance, nothing more. Then, in a cold, indifferent voice, he said, "Sorry, I have a cleanliness obsession." Ava froze, her little hands slowly lowering. Since that day, she started washing her hands over and over again, as if trying to scrub away the rejection. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. That he needed time. But then, I saw it. A video, circulating on social media. Someone had asked Ethan, "What's the happiest moment of your life?" And he had smiled, an unfamiliar, genuine smile. Last week abroad. I put Emma to sleep and then pulled Julie into the bathroom. The world around me shattered. 3 years. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of hope. 3 years of believing that maybe, just maybe, he would come back to us. It had all been a lie. That night, I printed out the divorce agreement. I was done waiting. The divorce papers sat on the table, staring back at me like a silent promise. A promise of freedom. A promise of a fresh start. A promise to never let Ethan hurt me or Ava again. But as I reached for them, a small, trembling voice broke the silence. Mom, does Ava not have a dad? I turned sharply, finding Ava standing at the door, clutching her stuffed bunny, her big eyes red and swollen from crying. My heart clenched. Dad promised he would come to my kindergarten meeting, she whispered. But when he got there, he said he was Emma's dad. I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. Mom, my classmates all say I don't have a dad. Her voice wavered, and then, in a broken sob, she cried, Boo-hoo, do I not have a dad? Tears burned behind my eyes as I rushed to pull her into my arms. I stroked her soft hair, trying to hold myself together, trying to come up with the right words. But all I could think about was him, his cold eyes, his distant voice, the way he had looked at Emma with love, but never at Ava. I wanted to tell her that her father loved her. I wanted to tell her that it was just a misunderstanding. But how could I? Ethan had made his choice, and we weren't in it. I'm sorry, Ava, I whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Mom will go to the parent-teacher meeting for you next time, okay? She sniffled and nodded. But even as I tucked her into bed, her little brows were furrowed, her fingers gripping the blanket tightly. Even in her sleep, she looked like she was waiting for him. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. Ava had woken up early and sat at the breakfast table, swinging her legs impatiently. Mom. Dad came home last night, right? Her eyes sparkled with hope. Can I show him my drawing? I forced a smile. Of course, sweetheart. Holding the family portrait she had worked so hard on, Ava ran downstairs, only to stop abruptly at the sight of them. Julie. Emma. And Ethan, sitting with them, peeling an orange for Emma. Ava hesitated, gripping her picture tighter, then slowly approached him. Dad, who are they? Ethan barely looked at her. Instead, he frowned. Why are you still home? Where's your mom? I had just come down the stairs when I saw Ava carefully holding up her drawing, her little hands shaking. It was a simple picture, a crayon drawing of our family. Me, Ava, and Ethan, standing together, smiling. She stretched out her tiny arms, offering it to him. But before Ethan could take it, a small hand reached out and snatched it away. Emma. She sneered at the picture, wrinkling her nose in disgust. What a stupid drawing. Then, in one cruel motion, she tore it in half. Ava gasped. Her little hands clutched at the torn pieces, her lips quivering. Why did you do that? Emma crossed her arms and lifted her chin. Because this is my dad, not yours. She shoved Ava hard. Ava stumbled back, falling onto the floor, her drawing slipping from her grasp. I snapped. Rushing forward, I pulled Ava into my arms and turned to Emma with blazing eyes. Apologize. Ethan frowned, not at Emma, but at me. Erica, why are you being so harsh on the kids? He said in an annoyed tone. I told you before, Emma is possessive. She doesn't like other kids calling me dad. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he defending her? She just called Ava a bastard, Ethan. My voice trembled with fury. Are you seriously saying that's okay? He hesitated, just for a second. Then he gently stroked Emma's hair, soothing her like a doting father. Emma didn't mean it. She was just upset. Julie, standing behind them, let out a graceful chuckle. I'm really sorry, Erica. Emma grew up abroad, so she speaks her mind. I hope you won't take it personally. Emma puffed out her chest, smirking. I wasn't wrong. The kids at school say Ava doesn't have a dad. She stole my dad. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. Ethan did nothing. Said nothing. I turned to him one last time. Ethan, I'm asking you one more time. Is Ava your daughter? His lips parted, but no words came out. Then, after a long pause, he let out a dry laugh. Do you really not know how she became my daughter? My whole body went cold. Julie let out a delicate sigh, rubbing Emma's back. Let's not make a fuss over small things. Erica, I don't want this to affect our friendship. Friendship? Was she joking? Ethan turned away, casually picking up Emma. Let's go buy you some toys and a new dress, sweetheart. He didn't look back. Didn't glance at Ava. Didn't even notice the way her tiny hands clutched at her torn drawing. And that was the moment I finally understood there was no saving this. I had spent years waiting for Ethan. Years hoping he would change. Years believing he would love Ava if only he spent time with her. But he never would. I felt a strange calmness settle over me as I walked back upstairs. Ava held on to my hand, her grip trembling. Mom, will Dad ever like Ava? I knelt down, holding her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Ava, you don't need to wait for him anymore. That night, as Ava slept, still clutching the broken pieces of her drawing, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The divorce agreement was already typed out. My fingers hovered over the print button, my heart pounding. I had been afraid to let go. Afraid to walk away. But not anymore. Because for the first time in years, I saw things clearly. Ethan didn't just not love me. He didn't love Ava either. And that? That was unforgivable. I pressed print. This time, I wasn't waiting anymore. The morning after I printed the divorce agreement, the house felt unbearably silent. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavy in the air, pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I stared at the papers on the desk, my fingers trembling. I had made up my mind. There was no turning back now. Ava was still asleep, her tiny arms wrapped around the remains of her torn drawing. Even in sleep, her face was troubled, her little brows furrowed. I reached out, gently brushing her hair back. She had endured enough. I wouldn't let her suffer any longer. Later that morning, I heard the sound of the front door opening. My body tensed as Ethan stepped inside. He was dressed in his usual tailored suit, exuding confidence and authority. But all I saw was the man who had abandoned his own daughter. I met his gaze without hesitation. Ethan, we need to talk. He sighed as if I were an inconvenience. Not now, Erica. I'm busy. Busy. Busy ignoring his own child. Busy pretending we didn't exist. I clenched my jaw, but before I could say anything, he added, by the way, Emma is coming over to play tomorrow. You and Ava should go out. My hands balled into fists. What? He smiled slightly, as if explaining something simple. Emma is possessive. She doesn't like other little girls calling me dad. I snapped. Do you even know who your real daughter is, Ethan? My voice shook with rage. Do you have any idea what Ava has been through? Do you know what happened to her at school yesterday? Ethan frowned, as if I was the problem. Erica, I don't need you to remind me of this. Remind you? My voice rose. Ava was humiliated in front of her whole class. She cried all night because of you. He looked irritated. I don't have time for this. Emma also had a parent-teacher meeting. Julie is going through a divorce, and she's overwhelmed taking care of her daughter alone. I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. So you abandoned your own daughter for someone else's child? He narrowed his eyes. I made a promise to Julie years ago. I swore that I would always take care of her. I felt something inside me break. I had begged. I had waited. I had endured years of pain, believing that someday he would see us. But he never would. You married me, Ethan, I whispered. But you never stopped loving her. For the first time, he hesitated. But it was too late. I took a deep breath, my voice steady now. I'm filing for divorce. His head snapped up. What? I met his cold gaze. You heard me. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. But then he scoffed. Erica, don't be ridiculous. You fought so hard to marry me. Do you really think I believe you'd walk away that easily? Julie let out a small laugh from the doorway, stepping closer. Ethan, she's just upset. It's just a phase. I turned to her, my voice ice cold. Julie, stay out of this. She feigned innocence. I'm just saying, you spent years chasing him. It's a little dramatic to throw it all away now. I smiled. A cold, knowing smile. Julie, you think I'm still that girl who loved him unconditionally. You think I'll beg. But I won't. Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. You're bluffing. I stepped forward, holding his gaze. Am I? Then I placed the divorce papers on the table in front of him. The smirk vanished. For the first time, realization dawned in his eyes. I wasn't bluffing. I was leaving. For good. That night, Ava curled up in my lap, her small fingers clutching my sleeve. Mom, are we really leaving? I kissed the top of her head. Yes, sweetheart. Her little voice was barely a whisper. What about Dad? I hesitated. Dad made his choice. She looked up at me, her big eyes filled with a sadness no child should ever have to bear. Then I choose you, Mom. Tears burned in my eyes as I hugged her tightly. This time I wouldn't look back. The next morning, I packed our bags. I had arranged everything. Ava and I would leave the country in a few days. My father had connections abroad, and I had made arrangements for us to start fresh. No more waiting. No more heartbreak. But just as I was about to walk out the door, my phone buzzed. A message from Julie. A video. I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and I saw Ethan. Someone off camera asked him, Ethan, what's the happiest moment of your life? I held my breath, hoping. Maybe, just maybe, he would say something about Ava. Maybe a small part of him still cared. But then he smiled. A soft, genuine smile. Last week abroad. I put Emma to sleep and then pulled Julie into the bathroom. My entire body went cold. Tears blurred my vision. A second message popped up. Julie, oops. I sent it by accident. I laughed. A broken, hollow laugh. Julie wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She was rubbing it in my face. Then another message came through. Julie, be honest, Erica. You knew this would happen. You trapped him into marriage. He was always going to come back to me. I clenched my jaw, my breath shaky. And then, Julie sent a photo. It was a picture of Ethan, Julie, and Emma. Ethan was kissing Emma's cheek. Julie was smiling up at him. They looked like a perfect little family. Like Ava and I had never existed. I exhaled slowly. Then I blocked her number. I wasn't going to waste another second on them. I grabbed Ava's hand, our suitcases in the other. As we walked out of the house, I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The past was behind me. The future was waiting. And this time I wasn't afraid. The airport buzzed with life, voices overlapping, luggage wheels rolling across polished floors, flight announcements echoing through the halls. But for me, it all faded into background noise. All I could focus on was Ava's tiny hand in mine. She clutched her little backpack, her eyes scanning the crowds with a quiet sadness. It hurt me to see her like this. To know that the father she had spent years waiting for wouldn't even realize she was gone. I squeezed her hand. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" She nodded, but her voice was hesitant. "Mom, will Dad miss us?" My heart clenched. I crouched down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sweetie, some people only realize what they've lost when it's too late." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I don't want to wait for him anymore." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. Neither did I. Hours later, our plane landed in a city oceans away. The air smelled different here, crisper, freer. The sun shone brighter, and the past felt a little farther behind. My father was waiting at the arrival's gate, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd until he saw me. "Daughter," he called, his face breaking into a wide smile. Ava let go of my hand and ran straight into his arms. "Grandpa." My father chuckled, lifting her up with ease. "Ah, you've grown, little one. Do you miss Grandpa?" Ava giggled. "Mom said we'll live with you now. We'll eat Grandpa's food and sleep in Grandpa's house." He let out a hearty laugh, then turned to me, his smile softening. "You finally left, huh?" I nodded, but there was a tightness in my chest. For years, I had tied my life to Ethan's. Even when he wasn't around, he was still in my thoughts. Still in my hopes. But now, for the first time in a decade, I was free. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. I started working for my father's company, handling international clients, diving into a career I had put on hold for so long. My skills were sharper than ever, and before I knew it, I was closing million-dollar deals with ease. Ava started school, making friends quickly, despite the language barrier. She was resilient, stronger than I ever imagined. She never once asked about Ethan. She never once cried for him. I told myself it was for the best. Until one night, I walked into her room to find her asleep, hugging a photo of Ethan. My breath caught in my throat. Even after everything, even after all the hurt, she still missed him. She still loved him. Tears stung my eyes, but I wiped them away and kissed her forehead. She would heal. So would I. One evening, as I was wrapping up work, I received an unexpected email. From Assistant Chin subject, urgent, Mr. Ethan is losing his mind. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a long message filled with desperation. "Madam, I don't know if you'll see this, but I have no other way to contact you. Mr. Ethan is not himself. Ever since you left, he has been searching everywhere. He's called in favors from the highest levels of government. He even went to Ava's old school, but no one would tell him where you went. He thought you were just throwing a tantrum. He thought you'd come back. But after days passed with no word from you, something changed. He hasn't been eating properly. He's barely working. And today, he finally snapped. He went to your old house, expecting to see you and Ava. But it was empty. Every trace of you, gone. He locked himself inside for hours, staring at Ava's old toys. And then, he tried to call you. When he saw that your number had been disconnected, he lost it. He smashed his phone. He started calling everyone, lawyers, friends, business contacts, anyone who might know where you were. But no one did. Madam, I've worked with Mr. Ethan for years, and I have never seen him like this. I don't know if you will ever forgive him. I don't know if he even deserves it. But for the first time in his life, he regrets everything. Please, if nothing else, at least let him know that Ava is okay." I closed the email, my hands trembling. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself it was too late. But then I heard Ava's voice behind me. "Mom? Is Dad looking for us?" I turned, my heart pounding. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then pointed at my laptop screen. "Is that from him?" I quickly closed the email. "No, baby. Just work stuff." She studied me carefully, then sighed. "Mom, I don't miss him anymore. Something in my chest ached. She was lying. But she was learning to live without him. Just like I was. 2 months passed. Life continued. Work flourished. Ava laughed more. And then, one morning, as I was heading to the office, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A voice I hadn't heard in months whispered, Erica. I froze. Ethan? There was silence. Then, a shaky breath. Where are you? His voice was hoarse, raw. I've been looking for you. I clenched my fist. Why? Because. His voice cracked. I was wrong. I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. That's all you have to say? You were wrong? Erica, please. He sounded desperate. I need to see you. I need to see Ava. My stomach twisted. The man who had once discarded us so easily was now begging. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. Ethan, we're done. A long silence. Then, a whisper. I love you. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced my voice to stay firm. You loved Julie. You loved Emma. You let Ava suffer. That's what you chose. Erica, I made a mistake. His voice cracked. I thought I could live without you. I thought I didn't care. But I was a fool. I squeezed my eyes shut. How many nights had I dreamed of hearing these words? But now, standing here, I felt nothing. You're too late, Ethan. He let out a strangled sound. Don't say that. I'll find you. I'll fix this. I exhaled slowly. You won't find me. And then, for the second time in my life, I walked away from Ethan. But this time I did it with no regrets. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. I had expected him to stop calling. Expected him to disappear back into the life he had chosen, the life where Ava and I didn't exist. But I had underestimated the power of regret. Because Ethan didn't stop searching. 2 weeks after his call, he found me. It was a regular morning. Ava was getting ready for school, her little feet tapping against the floor as she searched for her favorite hair clip. Mom. Where's the butterfly one? She called from her room. I smiled, walking over with the clip in my hand. Right here, sweetheart. She giggled. Thanks, Mom. I knelt to pin her hair back, my heart swelling with pride. Ava had grown so much in the past few months. She laughed more. Smiled more. She no longer whispered Daddy in her sleep. She no longer looked for him in crowds. And I thought we were finally free. Until the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My father was away on a business trip, and I hadn't invited anyone over. Frowning, I walked to the door, peering through the peephole. And my heart stopped. Ethan. He stood there, his usually sharp and confident features replaced by exhaustion. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes hollow, his suit wrinkled as if he had been wearing it for days. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. Then Ava's voice broke through my trance. Mom? Who is it? I panicked. My hand flew to the door handle, but I didn't open it. I wasn't ready. Not now. Not yet. Ava, baby, go get your backpack. I'll be right there. She nodded and ran off, her footsteps echoing down the hall. I turned back to the door, taking a deep breath before finally opening it. Ethan's eyes locked onto mine the second the door swung open. Erica. His voice was rough, pleading. I crossed my arms, forcing my face to remain blank. How did you find me? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Does it matter? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It does. Because I didn't want to be found. Ethan flinched. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at me. Like he was trying to memorize my face. Like he was afraid I would disappear again. Finally, he spoke. Erica, please. I need to see Ava. I stiffened. No. His breath caught. Erica, you lost that right, Ethan. My voice was calm, but my hands shook at my sides. You walked away from her. From us. You made your choice. He winced, pain flickering in his eyes. I was wrong. I scoffed. Wrong? You didn't just make a mistake, Ethan. You abandoned her. He swallowed hard. I thought. You thought we'd always be waiting, I cut him off. You thought I would just sit there, hoping you'd come home. But guess what? I didn't. We didn't. Ethan's jaw tightened. Erica, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but, you don't, I interrupted coldly. For the first time, I saw real fear flash across his face. Fear that he had lost us forever. Ethan, I waited 3 years, I whispered. 3 years for you to come home. And when you finally did, do you remember what you said to Ava? His throat bobbed. He didn't answer. I took a step closer, my voice deadly soft. You told her you had a cleanliness obsession. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. Erica, please, she washed her hands until they bled because she thought she was dirty. My voice cracked, the old pain rising in my chest. She thought that's why you wouldn't touch her. Ethan sucked in a sharp breath, staggering back as if I had hit him. I shook my head, blinking back tears. You did that to her, Ethan. You made her feel like she was nothing. His breathing was ragged, his hands shaking. I didn't mean to, but you did, I whispered. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then a soft voice broke the silence. Daddy? Ethan's head snapped up. Ava. She stood at the end of the hallway, her small body half hidden behind the wall. Her big brown eyes wide, uncertain. She hadn't seen him in months. And yet, she recognized him immediately. I turned to her, my heart hammering. Ava, sweetheart, go wait in the car, okay? But she didn't move. She just stared at Ethan. And then, to my shock, she took a step forward. Ethan sucked in a shaky breath. Ava. She blinked. Are you really here? His face crumpled. Yes, baby, he whispered. I'm here. She took another step. Then another. I watched, frozen, as she walked right up to him. Ethan dropped to his knees. His hands trembled as he reached out, but he stopped himself, like he was afraid to touch her. Ava, his voice broke. I missed you so much. She tilted her head. Studied him. And then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, you left me. Ethan flinched. Tears welled in Ava's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. You didn't want me before. Why do you want me now? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Ava sniffled. Are you gonna leave again? He shattered. Ava, he choked out, his voice breaking completely. I will never, ever leave you again. I swear. Ava hesitated. Then, carefully, she reached forward and placed her tiny hand in his. Ethan let out a strangled sound, clutching her fingers like his life depended on it. For a moment, they just stared at each other. And then, just as I started to think that maybe, just maybe, he could fix this, Ava pulled her hand away. She stepped back, her little face serious. Daddy, she said softly. I don't need you anymore. Ethan went still. Her voice didn't hold anger. Just acceptance. And that was what broke him the most. She turned to me, her expression clear. Let's go, Mom. I nodded. We walked away without looking back. Ethan never moved. Never spoke. He just knelt there, staring at the spot where his daughter used to be. Ethan never came after us. Not that day. Not the next. Not ever again. I had expected him to fight, to show up at our door, to try one last time. But he didn't. Maybe because he finally understood. He had lost us forever. Ava never spoke about him after that day. She never asked about him. Never cried for him. It was as if she had erased him from her world. And I let her. Because I knew she deserved better. Because I had finally learned that love isn't supposed to hurt. I poured everything into building a life for us. My career thrived. My father retired, leaving me in charge of his company. I closed million-dollar deals, expanded the business, made a name for myself. I was no longer Ethan's wife. I was Erica. Ava flourished, too. She made friends, aced her schoolwork, and filled our home with laughter. For the first time in years, we were happy. And then, one evening, as I was finishing up work, my phone buzzed. A message from Assistant Chin. Subject: Ethan has lost everything. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally clicking it open. And what I read shocked me. Ethan was gone. His company had collapsed. The stock had plummeted overnight, wiping out everything he had built. Julie had betrayed him. She had gone to the press, leaking private documents and exposing his infidelity, his treatment of Ava, his business dealings. His reputation was in ruins. His wealth was gone. And worst of all? He was alone. Julie had taken Emma and disappeared. Everyone he had once trusted had abandoned him. And now, the man who once had everything had nothing. Assistant Chen's last line hit me the hardest. Madam, I think he finally understands what you felt all those years. I sat there for a long time, staring at my screen. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't even feel pity. I just felt nothing. Ethan had made his choices. And now, he was paying the price. Months passed. One night, as Ava and I were leaving a restaurant, we ran into someone unexpected. A man, tall, confident, kind. A business partner I had worked with for months. He had always been interested in me, but I had kept my distance. That night, as he walked me to my car, he smiled softly. Erica, I know you don't believe in love anymore. I know you don't want to marry again. But I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking for a chance. I looked at him. For the first time in years, I felt something. Something warm. Something new. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no, either. And when I glanced at Ava, she smiled up at me and whispered, Mom, I like him. I laughed, ruffling her hair. Yeah? She nodded. He's nice. I met the man's gaze. Okay, I said softly. One chance. And for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself hope. Ethan never contacted me again. But one day, a letter arrived. From him. I hesitated before opening it. Erica, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But if you do, I just want you to know that I was a fool. I thought I had time. I thought I could push you away and that you'd always be there when I was ready. But I was wrong. I didn't just lose you. I lost Ava. She was my daughter, and I never even held her. I live with that regret every single day. I know I don't deserve another chance. But if you ever tell Ava about me, tell her that I am sorry. Tell her that I love her, even if I never showed it. And tell her that if I could turn back time, I would have chosen her every single time. Take care, Erica. Be happy. Ethan. I read the letter once. Then, without a second thought, I tore it to shreds. Ethan was my past. But my future? That belonged to me. And as I walked into the living room, where Ava was waiting with her bright smile and endless love, I knew I had finally won.